The News from Lake Wobegon podcast is brought to you by Pillsbury Crescent Dinner Rolls in your grocer's refrigerated section. Make an easy wow for dinner tonight in just 11 minutes with fresh-baked Pillsbury Crescents for dinner. Home is calling. And by the Sleep Number bed by Select Comfort, the bed that lets you adjust the mattress firmness to your preference, your sleep number. It's been a quiet week in Lake Wobegon, Minnesota, my hometown. Out on the edge of the prairie, it's been cool out there. Cool, but not cold yet. We haven't had snow yet. It's been in the 20s and the 30s, and so people have been out in their sweatshirts doing yard work. People who frittered away those golden October afternoons when they should have been doing their yard work and put that off, and now they do not suffer any penalty for this. They're still able to do this in late November. It's like the parable of the yard work, where the people who come late to the job do just as well as the people who came early to the job and who did it back when they should have done it. People like myself, we were brought up by strict parents who made you believe that you couldn't get away with that sort of thing. You see, if you didn't do things when you were supposed to do them, then you would be penalized forever and your lawn would die or something. So we spent our sunny October Saturdays raking leaves and doing yard work. And now, for our leisure time, we have these grim, cold, gray, late November Saturdays. And those people had their leisurely, beautiful Saturdays in October. Where is the justice in this? I just ask. But you grow up in a small town and you believe there is no forgiveness for your mistakes. And so you have this voice that goes on in your head for the rest of your born days, saying, "What are you thinking? You are doing it all wrong. You're never going to make anything of yourself." And so there we are. Anyway, people were doing yard work in Lake Wobegon and waiting for the first idiot to go out on the ice on the lake. It's all iced over, but it's still rather thin. Who will be the first idiot who wants to be the first one out? There will be an idiot. They're always in a new one every year. There's a constant supply of them. And who will it be? Thanksgiving on Thursday, this gorgeous day, this religious day, even for irreligious people, the day of gratitude and of feasting. Jesus said in Scripture, "I was hungry and you fed me. I was naked and you clothed me," which is another one of those Bible verses that goes against what you were brought up to believe, in which Jesus seems to be saying that how we treat each other is how we will be judged in heaven, and not by our compliance with religious dogma or doctrine or our observance of the law, which is not what we were brought up to think. Anyway, there were no naked people showed up for Thanksgiving. Everyone who came was fully clothed, but we made up for it by giving them food, giving food to the hungry and pouring it on them. Clarence and Arlene Bunson did not go to the Curtis Hotel in Minneapolis, where she had wanted to spend Thanksgiving after their children abandoned them for the holiday. And they did not either have homeless people into their home, as Clarence said he wanted to do. But instead, they went off to his cousin Lorraine Tromso's out east of St. Cloud, out on the old Tromso farm, and her 5 brothers and sisters. They went over to the cousins, whom he hadn't seen in years, so he was so surprised when Lorraine called him up to invite him for Thanksgiving, and he didn't have the presence of mind to invent a plausible story for why they couldn't go. And so they wound up doing something that neither of them wanted to do, you see. They had one of those arguments. Well, I'd like to go to the Curtis Hotel, but I don't want to go because you don't want to. No, we can go if you want to go. Let's go. You want to go? Let's go. No, I don't want to go. We'll do what you want to. No, I don't want to do it. So they had one of those arguments, and so they did what they didn't want to do, and they went off to the Tromso farm to have Thanksgiving with these large-boned, glum people with big eyebrows sitting around in glum, miserable silence in an overheated living room, packed with people. Clarence remembered on the drive over there the last time he'd seen them when they were all little children, and their father, Albert, was a hog farmer, and how hard the children worked, and how strict their father was, and he was watching them with an eagle eye, everything that they did to point out their mistakes, and some weeds that they had forgotten, and some tomatoes that they had not picked on the vine, and some potatoes that were left in the ground. He was a hard man. Nobody worked harder than those children. Well, they arrived and walked into the kitchen, which was steaming, of course, and it was packed with enormous women who were working with this silent fury, just whomping together. It was like an emergency room in the kitchen. It was like the turkey had been injured in a car crash, and they could save its life with transfusions of butter. And then out in the living room were these large, haunched men sitting cheek to jowl, watching large men on television run into each other. Large men sitting in silence and drinking this punch out of big mugs that they called bug juice that was made from Kahlua and bourbon and rum. It was a powerful thing, and they were in a stupor already and descending farther into unconsciousness. They just didn't have a thought in their heads. Bug juice, because it keeps the bugs off you, I guess, or it just makes you so you don't care if there are bugs on you or not. Just packed with people in this overheated room, and there were 3 long tables set up, and Clarence and Arlene sat up at the end of the table with Lorraine and her husband Larry, and then the Tromso children, and then the grandchildren sat at the next table, and then the in-laws sat at the farthest table by their own choice, and food, just groaning with food, and with the spinach balls and the yams and the glazes, and there was a big platter of ham, and then a big platter of white meat turkey, and dark meat turkey, and mashed potatoes, and everywhere you looked there was a little pitcher of gravy, and there was a plate of butter, and everything that they brought to the table was glistening with butter, just glittering with butter. There was just animal fat sewn through the whole thing. Pounds of butter had disappeared, tubs of butter, vats of butter. The fat of the land had gone into this food. They sat there hunched over, and Larry said the briefest table grace, "Come, Lord Jesus, be our guest, let this food to us be blessed." And they dug in, and there was a little sort of jovial chatter as they passed the food around, and then they just dug into it, and just the sound of cutting and chewing for the next hour just went on and just packed it away. And as you sat there eating 3 times as much as you ever wanted to eat, you could imagine little hooves on your feet and little bristles on your snout. They were just pulled up tight to the feed trough, and they ate until they could barely move, and then they hoisted themselves up, and they took a break in the family room. They all sat around in a big room where Larry had made a fire in the fireplace, so it was hot in there, and they'd been drinking bug juice, and they were practically comatose. Clarence and Arlene sat in the corner. They looked at each other. Arlene said, "Can you drive?" Clarence said, "Yes, but we better leave pretty soon." "Well, I hope so," she said. And then Lorraine's brother, Henry Tromso, stood up and dinged on his glass. And he said, "I want to make a Thanksgiving toast to members of my family." They were all looking at their shoes. They didn't want to hear this. Members of my family and not my dad. That son of a bitch. Oh, Lorraine said, oh, please. Do we have to listen to this? Yes. Yes, Henry said, we have to listen to this. We grew up with the meanest man there ever was in this world. Made us work and work and work and work, and never a word of praise did we get. No. He was the hardest person in the world, and we thought this was a normal upbringing. Twisted us for the rest of our lives. And then we made the great discovery. Oh, please, Lorraine said, do you have to go into this now? Yes, he said, yes. And he looked at Clarence and Arlene, and he said, we made a discovery about our father. A few years ago, I was out driving over this little town, Malay. It's about 20 miles north of here. And I noticed a grade school, and it was called the Albert W. Johnson Memorial Grade School. My father's name was Albert W. Tromso, and his mother's name was Johnson. Well, now that made me curious, and I made a U-turn, and I drove into the parking lot, and I walked into the Albert W. Johnson Memorial Grade School, and there in the lobby was a big photograph of my father. I didn't recognize him. He was grinning. And he had his arms around little children. I had never seen him like that in my life. Well, it was my father. It took me 2 days just to get a little information. I went down to the county courthouse. I had to look through the records going way back. And I discovered that this Albert W. Johnson had arrived in Malay in 1955, and he bought a farm out north of town. And 1957, he married Bertha Bartoldi. And they had 3 children, Eric, Elaine, and Elizabeth. And they lived out there on that farm, and he raised flowers out there. And he was beloved in this town. He was beloved for his sense of humor and his generosity and his jokes and his singing. He sang. He sang at weddings and funerals. He sang at schools. He sang everywhere he could. He never sang to us. Ever, growing up, never. What happened? What happened here? He told us that he was a traveling salesman. He was out selling magazine subscriptions. And we had to work hard and raise those hogs, keep that lawn mowed, raise that garden, can those vegetables. And then he'd go off selling, we thought. But he was going off to be Albert W. Johnson, 20 miles away, and to be happy and to raise these children and to sing to them. I'd never forgiven him for that, ever. Well, Clarence looked uneasy. He looked over towards Arlene. They looked at each other, not sure what to say. And then Clarence remembered that this family was accident-prone, the Tromsos. They'd had a long history of things falling on them. Limbs of trees would fall on Tromsos as if they're attracted by magnetic force. Once, Larry Tromso had space debris fall in his front yard. One of the Tromsos was married in a hotel ballroom, and a chandelier fell and could have killed them all. And that's where Albert W. Tromso, or Johnson, died, was the day after Thanksgiving in 1985. He came back to his farm and raged at his children for not cleaning their rooms. And he was tired, he said, and he went into the front room to lie down. And as he was lying there sleeping, a bookcase that was filled with heavy books that he had bought at rummage sales over the years and had never read, big, heavy encyclopedias and dictionaries. It fell down and it crushed him. He was crushed by knowledge, crushed by books he'd never read. Well, here's a toast to us, said Henry. It's a hard life. Somehow we survived it. I don't know how. Arlene excused herself, went to use the toilet. She went into the bedroom where all the coats were piled on the bed, and she fished hers out from underneath, and Clarence's too. And then she called Clarence on his cell phone. It rang in his pocket. His ring is "A Mighty Fortress Is Our God." And he answered it. She said, "We got to get out of here now. Tell him any story you can think of. We got to get out of here now." He put the phone back in his pocket. He stood up. He said, "I'm sorry, we have to leave. Our dog has been taken ill and has been taken to a hospital and is not expected to live more than a couple more hours. I'm sorry, it's been wonderful, and thank you so much, Lorraine, for inviting us." It was right then, as they were putting their coats on, that one of the little Tromsø children barfed. Just right there. Just a little boy standing there looking at them, barfed the way children do, with no uneasiness, just standing there, smiling. Then suddenly, whoa, it comes out. Whoa. Just barfed all over, and then it was all over. He was happy. He went back to doing what he'd been doing. They scooted out of there. They got in their car. It was cold outside, but cold air is so wonderful when you've been surrounded by this misery and this grief. All these wonderful cars parked outside, and all those Tromsøs had done pretty well, and they were pretty well dressed inside. Sad people leading happy lives who grew up relatives of ours. Clarence and Arlene drove home as fast as they could. They went into their refrigerator, into their cupboards. They got out all the butter, all the bread, all the leftovers, and they took it all out behind the garage, and they left it out there for the raccoons, all of it. They put it all out there, and they went in, and they got some oranges, and they got some rye crisp and some black coffee. And that's what they're drinking nowadays. That's the news from Lake Wobegon, Minnesota, where all the women are strong, all the men are good looking, and all the children are above average. The News from Lake Wobegon podcast is brought to you by Pillsbury Crescent Dinner Rolls in your grocer's refrigerated section. Make an easy wow for dinner tonight in just 11 minutes with fresh-baked Pillsbury Crescents for dinner. Home is calling.